Striking Gold, the Mother Lode Landscape. It's not a show about topography, but who will be atop the Mother Lode League. I'm Levi Flores. He's Jeremy Hurtado, the Mother Lode League expert around here, coached at multiple different teams. He's been watching football for a long while, and this year is the final year of the Mother Lode League as we know it. For the last 8 years, it's been Amador, Argonaut, Calaveras, Bret Harte, Sonora, and Somerville. But this is the final year, and all the teams, except for one, vying for that final Mother Lode League title.
Absolutely, and it's one of those things where Sonora has been the top dog. They've been that since they came here. Can they finish off and just do a clean sweep in the Mother Lode League before they go to the Trans Valley League? Or will somebody, say Somerville, Argonaut, come up and jump up and take that number one spot from them?
It'll definitely be an interesting season. Last year, we're going to go through all the different teams, but last year we saw one of the closest battles probably in the league, recent times at least, between Sonora and Somerville. And in the end, Sonora, like we said, got that victory. But now, as the new season starts, different people are coming into play, different teams, different coaches, and everything is just coming together for another exciting year.
Yeah, it's an absolute transition year for the Mother Lode League. You got, obviously, teams leaving after this year. You got new coaches coming in, taking over programs at several different spots, teams dropping out of the league for the year. So it's kind of a transition year, like we said. It's going to be interesting to see how everything plays out throughout the whole season.
So we're going to start with Amador, going from the top of the state down to the bottom. And with Amador, they've been struggling since the COVID year. They had a few victories that season, the 2020-21 season. They only were allowed to play teams that were in their same county or one county over. So they had a different type of schedule where they played Calaveras, their crosstown rivals Argonaut, and then also a team from South Tahoe in which they went 2-1, only losing to South Tahoe by 2 points.
Yeah, absolutely. And that looked like it was going to build into a positives for them coming into the 22 and 22 season, and things kind of unraveled for them, unfortunately. Had some issues, only got to play 3 games before their season got cut short. Disciplinary actions taken care of, everybody knows about that. The positive now is they're back. Okay, the question mark is, what do they have? They haven't played football for almost 2 years now. Their JV team, who I've heard from a good source, is absolutely loaded. So does that mean their varsity team is loaded as well, or are they trying to rebuild the JV team and kind of just hang on with the varsity? We don't know. We reached out for comments. They didn't get back to us this week, so we'll have to wait and see tomorrow night when they play their first game how things kind of go for them.
It'll definitely be interesting. They're 0-18 in the last 2 seasons, but one thing I do know about Amador, just from growing up in the counties, is that they'll have a few bad seasons and all of a sudden come out of the blue, literally the blue Buffaloes, and just dominate everyone. I believe one of these recent years they gave Sonora a run for their money and tied for the league title.
Yeah, they did. A few years back, went to the playoffs the last couple of years that Baker was there as the head coach. So, like you said, and coming out of the blue, they got a brand new blue turf that they get to unveil for the first time in league because they got it last year, didn't get to use it for league games. So it's going to be interesting to see how Amador plays out there. They're the question mark. They're one of those teams that we don't know a lot about. And again, tomorrow night, they have a game. It'll be kind of give us a little bit more information to talk about next week.
And then talking about the future of Amador itself, not just this year, because we're just taking a look again, and will the team be loaded or will the JV team be the one to step up? If they are the team to step up, and that's what the program is looking towards, they'll play in the Sierra Valley Conference next year, in which teams like Bradshaw Christian, El Dorado, Galt, Liberty Ranch, Rosemont, and Union Mine, with the addition of Amador and then Argonaut as well. That'll be interesting to see because some of those teams, they're known as some higher prospects, but maybe not in football.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, it'll be better for the whole athletic program because there's less travel. Mm-hmm. Okay, you're not going to Somerville, you're not going to Sonora. Everything's kind of in that, 45 minutes range, so that's going to be great for us non-football sports. It also sets up, Bradshaw Christian's been in the playoffs. I'm just off my head, didn't look it up, but the last 3 or 4 years.
Right.
They're always a decent team. They run the double wing offense, double tight situation, which usually sets up well for Argonaut. We'll get to that in a little bit. But and then El Dorado, I've coached against them a couple times. They have athletes.
Yes, they
have some athletes there. They run that spread football. They usually have a quarterback that can sling it around and a running back that's pretty decent. So those are going to cause some interesting matchups. And Liberty Ranch, Galt, both rebuilding, both with new coaching staff. So it's going to kind of see how that plays out for them. But I think it's going to be good for Amador and Argonaut both, like I said, just because, yes, it may be a kind of a strange situation in football, but I think it's going to help every other sport outside of football.
And now, not looking at football itself, but what do you think about the change for them?
Like I said, I think it's going to be a positive for them. It's going to, obviously, I think it takes away from the other league because I think Amador and Argonaut both bring positives to that. The idea was they were going to merge, and then they decided they're not going to, or that's still to be determined. I don't know. It goes back and forth. Every time I talk to someone, they say maybe, maybe not. So if they do merge, it'll be great. I mean, that's going to be one football team, one school. It's going to make a big impact in that league. If they don't, I think they can both still be competitive in that league. So like I said, it's a win-win for them.
And I personally like the Mother Lode League as it stands with even Sonora being in there, just having the Tri-County, it really puts together the Mother Lode as a whole. But unfortunately, with just the dominancy that Sonora brings and Amador and Argonaut being so far away, it has made it difficult throughout the last 8 years. But I'm glad we had the 2 cycles to bring through it. Going back to the Sierra Valley Conference in which Amador and Argonaut will both be playing in, I did the stats from 2005 till now. Without including Argonaut, Amador against those 6 teams is 15-9.
Okay.
Now you add Argonaut into the mix, and they are 21-22. So Argonaut definitely has a hold on them, but it is a definite fair share between all the teams that are eventually going to be in that league.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as an athletic director, as a sports program, as a school, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that balance. Hey, we might be able to be really good one year, and maybe we're not so great, but we can still be competitive. And so that's what you're looking for. And like I said, I think it's going to be a great thing for both Amador and Argonaut to move in that league, although it does hurt, like I said, the traditional Mother Lode League situation that's been around for a while.
And now we come up to this week. Tomorrow night, Amador going to have their first game against Forest Hill. And now when you look at the Max Preps rankings, which if you're familiar with Max Preps, they kind of give some good feedback and then maybe some not good feedback. But in the end, it's got to be close enough. If somebody's going to be giving a stat on a professional site, it's going to be somewhat close in any regard. Amador ranked 134 in the section, Forest Hill 130, so only a few spots separating them, and this could be one of the better games throughout the week for the Mother Lode League.
Yeah, I think that's a great matchup, too, for Amador to go up to Forest Hill, or is it at Amador?
I'm not sure.
Either way, they're playing one of the greatest high school mascots ever, the Forest Hill Wildfire. I love it. Okay, I mean, you can't get better than that. And I think it's going to be a good matchup, especially since they haven't played in a couple years. If they can get off to a good start against them, get things rolling, and kind of build for next week, then I think that'll be a positive for Amador.
Especially those junior players that got their season cut short last year and they saw the JV team keep going.
Right.
Those players are going to come back with a vengeance and want to dominate every way they can, offensive and defensive. They want to get their touchdowns back. They want to get their stats up so that they can have stories to tell in the future. But along with that, they've actually played twice since 2005. They are 0-2 against Forest Hill, in which they played in 2010 with a 27-24 loss and a 20-12 loss in 2011. Back-to-back years there, but now they're bringing it back and seeing if they can take that victory away.
Yeah, and like I said, I think it's going to be a good matchup for them. I think they have 2 teams that are going to probably be pretty equal on the field, and a great matchup between a Buffalo and a Wildfire. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. So.
Last season, Forest Hill was 2-6, and they've won both of their games in league play. But now, starting off that first game, it is going to be interesting. Do you have any predictions? Let's start with the game first, and then we'll move on to the season.
If I was going to look at it, I'd say I think I'd give the edge to Amador, even though, like you said, they're 0-2 against Forest Hill in the last couple meetings. But I'm going to say Amador probably 22-16.
All right, I like that range. I think first game of the season, maybe rebuilding the teams both. They're going to be a little bit sloppy, whether that means there's a lot of turnovers or there's a lot of turnovers that lead to scoring. It's just going to be back and forth. I think it'll be probably 21-14, something close like that. So I know I'm basically cheating off you there.
No, that's good.
I do like your take on that. And now the season for Amador, Mother Lode League once again.
Yeah.
Factor in that preseason too.
And that's going to be tough. I think it's going to be a difficult season for Amador. I have them finishing in 5th place overall for the year, just because it's just so much unknown for them. I think if you can build and get 3 to 4 wins, whether those be league wins or if they're preseason wins, I think that's kind of where you're looking for to target for if you're Amador.
And you have them in the 5th place spot. I'm actually going to take a turn on my rankings and give them the 4th place spot over Argonaut.
Okay.
Just because I think even though Argonaut has a lot of wins over Amador since being so close to each other for so long, I think Amador is going to flip a switch, beat Argonaut, and they're just going to have that one game advantage over their county rival.
And again, you talked about a rivalry. You never know what's going to happen. It doesn't matter if you're 7-1 and 1-7 coming in the game. Hey, you want to beat that team. That's the team that you grew up wanting to come away with that victory over, and especially for seniors, it's going to be important. So, I mean, I honestly can't fault you for that.
We'll see what happens throughout the next 11 weeks. But as we move on to Argonaut, the 21-22 CIF 6AA state champions, they had a great year 2 years ago, and last year they fell quite short and fell on their faces. But just like Amador, they're going to come out of the blue and probably tear something up within the next 2 or 3 years. And I'm excited to see that because I always want to see these teams succeed.
Yeah, they finished third place last year in league, which, okay, that doesn't sound too difficult, but the 5-7 record, you look at that and go, okay, well, that was a little difficult. They were 3-2 in league. They got to the playoffs and they lost in the first round to Colfax. No shame there. Colfax is tough, especially when you got to go up there and play.
Yes.
One of the hardest places to play in
Halfway
the section.
to Reno.
Yeah, I mean, you're almost there. So another disadvantage for Argonaut, or situation for Argonaut, is Coach Ricky Davis left. He stepped down.
That's right.
They got a new head coach, John Hickman. He was a Calaveras assistant, but he went to Argonaut. So it's kind of a, hey, I'm coming back home, bringing a new style of offense, supposedly, according to some people I talked to, is that may strike out of the little double wing a little bit more, which they had done the last couple years and been kind of a spread double wing type of issue. So that'll be interesting to see what offense he decides to bring to Argonaut. And one thing I've been told is he'll have his teams ready to play. He's a good motivational coach. They'll be ready to go on Friday night. So I kind of think Argonaut could be a shocker. It could be one of those teams that, I know you have them in the 5 slot. I have them a little higher than that. We'll get to that in a little bit. But it's one of those things I think that Argonaut could come up and make a run.
I mean, we never know until we see the teams play, and one thing that I always look at is the common opponents. So early on in the preseason, when we see a few of these teams play teams that we know other Mother Lode teams are going to play, that could be a little bit of a factor in how we change our rankings through the season.
Absolutely. This is preseason ranking, so it could change. After the games tomorrow night, we could be like, okay, scratch that. We're going to move people around. Next week, come out with a whole new ranking, so
exactly.
We'll see.
And I doubt Sonora's going to move, but hey.
You never know,
Yeah.
It's one of those things.
Something can happen. Going back to the 21-22 season, I have written down that the freshmen from that team are now seniors, but I believe it's the sophomores that are now seniors, in which there was a handful of them that are still on there. So they do have the ability to just bring out that energy and say, hey, we were part of a state champion team. Follow our lead. We're going to take us to major heights.
No, absolutely. And like you talked about, leadership on a team, especially with a new coaching staff, bringing that in, it's going to be huge if he can get those seniors to buy into what he's trying to sell. That's where you get teams that become special. When you got teams that are, I don't know what coach is talking about, I'm not sure, I don't agree with all that, that's when you get kind of problems and you get people talking about things in the locker room, and it doesn't always go well. But if he can get those seniors that were there, been there, done that, to buy into his system, which I believe he will, I think that things could go well for Argonaut.
Finishing up on some of the stats from that season, they went second in league, only losing to Sonora by a touchdown, 28-21. They had 560 points for, 195 points against. So a very good defense, very good offense, very run heavy, but like you just mentioned, going to shy away from that a little bit. And then moving on to next season, going to move with Amador into the Sierra Valley Conference. 10-5 record versus the team since 2005 without Amador. So they have a 2-1 play there, and then 23-11 record including Amador. So right now they're looking a little bit better, but it's all up in the air.
And it is, and it's Argonaut's one of those teams that's tough to prepare for when they ran the double wing. If they continue to do that, then I think that may not help them as much in that league, because Bradshaw Christian runs that and has ran that for years. Now, I know Argonaut and Bradshaw have played each other multiple times.
Right.
So it's not like, okay, hey, this is a new thing for us. But I do think that Argonaut's going to bring kind of a different look to that league, and I think it's going to be successful for Argonaut, just as I thought it would for Amador. And either way, I think they're both going to come in there, and they may not set records and be the number 1, 2, 3 seeds, but they'll be in that 2 to 3, 4 seed type, I think, every year. So I think that's where it plays out better for them in the long run.
And now I didn't mention this when we talked about Amador, but how do you think having an 8-team league is going to differ from having the 5 or 6-team league as the MLL?
Yeah, and that's where you get into, you're playing more league games. You get those less prep games or non-league games, even though they still count for playoffs. They're still in the rankings. They count for everything. It's not like NFL where you get preseason or games that don't matter. Those non-league games still count, and they help you build towards league. But you only get 2 of them now, or 3 of them actually, if there's an 8-team league. And then, so that, yeah, you got to crank things up a little sooner. You may have a league game that starts week 2.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and so that's a little different, and it's going to take some adjustment, but it does for both sides because everybody in that league is going to go from a smaller 5-team league up to an 8-team league. So I don't think that's going to have an advantage to anybody, but it is a little different as far as coaches go. So, hey, week 1, we got to get a little more amped up because we got a league game next week as opposed to, hey, we got 4 weeks before we got league games.
Now, moving on to week 1 for Argonaut, playing Douglas, who they played last year and lost 20-0, and that was Douglas's only win. Yeah, and I watched a little bit of that game last year online, and it seemed like Douglas kind of just, unfortunately, ran over Argonaut. You know, I mean, they couldn't, they held Argonaut scoreless. Argonaut couldn't get the ball moving. So I think that going up to Douglas this year, Argonaut's going to want a little payback. You know, I mean, hey, those guys were there. They were in the bid there, done that. That was the first loss of the season for them. And going up to, sometimes it's easier to play on the road. As crazy as that sounds, because you have all the distractions that aren't there. Maybe your girlfriend's not there. Maybe your family's not there. Maybe XYZ is not there. So you get that bus ride to kind of, and especially from there, that's a little bit of a ride. But you get that time to kind of bond with your teammates. You get a chance to just mentally prepare a little bit better. And when you're sitting there watching the JV game, there's not a lot of people saying, hey, let's talk about this. Let's do this. What happened in class today? This, all that's gone, and you kind of just get to sit and get mentally prepared a little better for the road games. And so sometimes you'll see teams play better after a long road trip. I think Argonaut goes up there and they pull off the win tomorrow night against Douglas. All right. I mean, I'm hoping for that as well. Argonaut's going to be one of those tougher teams. I have them at the 5, but hey, I do think that they are going to win a few games. In that game last year, only 68 plays were attempted, 31 for Argonaut, 37 for Douglas. And with your football knowledge, how does that affect the game?
Yeah, neither team wants to play spread football. They both run the football, or Argonaut did last year, and Douglas. So, I mean, that's not a shock to me. They both kept the clock rolling with the ball running. So it's one of those things where defense is going to be big. Obviously, usually in the first couple weeks of the season, defense are usually a little ahead of the offense as it is. So that could play a part too. I wouldn't be shocked if a special teams or a turnover ends up swinging the game either way.
20 players graduated last year from the Argonaut roster, so it's a very young team, which will help out Coach, but will that help him out this year or next year?
That's the question. I mean, unfortunately, like I said, Argonaut, we didn't get a response back from them. I do have some sources that kind of gave me some information. But yeah, we're going to see tomorrow night against Douglas. We don't know. It's kind of they're kind of that question mark team as well. It's going to be interesting. Now, overall for the season, I think they're going to be okay. I really do. I think their schedule works out well for them. I think that they're going to shock a couple teams in league, and I have them in that coin flip 2-3 range in league, and I slotted them when we did this the other day. I slotted them at 2. I'm going to stick with it. Okay, so Argonaut, I got your back. Let's see if we can put you in that 2 slot for the league.
For me, like I said, I have them low. In regards to tomorrow night's game, I think you're right about having that turnover going to be a factor, but I think there's going to be multiple. So you get to choose which one it's going to be.
It's early in the season, I agree. Yeah.
And I think 21-14, that was my guess for the Amador game. But in games that you just don't know, allowing a few touchdowns and giving some away too is definitely going to be that. So I'm going to stick with the same 21-14 for both Amador and Argonaut.
Okay, and I'm going to say it's going to be 21-17. I think a field goal could end up being in there too as well. But yeah, I'm going to say 21-17, Argonaut. I could see that.
All right. And season-wise, at the bottom, but I think that Calaveras, Argonaut, Amador are going to have not a tie, but they're going to have a battle against each one and fight for that number 3 slot.
No, absolutely.
And I think I have my 1 and 2 locked in, but I just think that's what's going to end up happening here. And now moving on now to Calaveras County, new coach, which means changes, and Jeremy's going to tell us all about that one.
Yeah, Calaveras, last year they technically went 0-10, 0-4 because they had to forfeit due to a paperwork eligibility issue over there. Gone is the head coach that was there before, and that was,
Forgot a name.
Yeah, I have it here. Regardless, Manny Mosa is now the new head coach at Calaveras. He was assistant last year over there. He brings a new offensive coordinator in with him as well, with Mike Sewell, who was the 2013 All-MLL MVP running back that played there and was a great player there for Calaveras. So things are, like we talked about, transition changes going on for the league. The former assistant Doug Clark, the head coach Doug Clark, he's actually going to stay on and be an assistant. So that's great for him. He just wanted to step away and have more time with his family, which we understand completely, especially as a coach. But yeah, it's been a rough couple of years for them. I think they've won 2 games over the last 2 seasons on the field. And so that's been not Calaveras-like. Yeah. Okay, they're usually a team that's battling for that top 2-3 slots in the league. Hasn't been that way the last couple of years. Now, Coach Mosa comes in. The report I have from our source over at the Calaveras Enterprise, Guy Dossie, is that he's trying to bring back historically what Calaveras has been before. Power football run, solid defense, which makes sense with Sewell coming as the offense coordinator again. He was the running back that ran that offense perfectly for years over there at Calaveras. I think he was a three-year varsity player over there. So that doesn't shock me that that's what they're trying to lean towards. The question mark is going to be there, I think, for me, is offensive line play. Last year they were kind of not solid up front on either side of the football, and that cost them. Teams kind of ran on them a little bit, and they had a hard time protecting. I know they got Ethan Porath back this year. He's an offensive lineman. He's been there for a year starter. So they're going to try and build that offensive line around him. The question mark is going to be, can they find enough guys that are big enough up front to open those holes for the running backs that they have coming back?
And some of the changes to the team, actually, I really only have one because he was a staple in the Calaveras sports teams in general, Braden Orlandi.
Yeah, absolutely. He was the running back. He was their guy. He was their
Started out as quarterback, too.
He played quarterback for him, but defensive end, I mean, he was everything. Unfortunately for them, he's gone. He's playing college football. Okay, so it's going to be interesting who fills in that quarterback / running backs position. We got Urbina that's coming back for him. He played the varsity last year. He's the only player with a varsity touchdown from last year that's coming back. And then Josh Monzo is the guy that's slated to be the varsity quarterback. We'll see. He played on the JV last year as a sophomore. We'll see. A JV player coming up to play varsity football. We're going to talk about that elsewhere again later on in the league conversation. There's a difference between playing JV football and varsity football. And then you're like, okay, that's only a year. But the biggest hurdle as a high school player is that junior year coming up from JV to varsity. It's usually where you have the biggest learning growth. So for Monzo's case, is it going to be a situation where hey, I know this offense, it's going to be good, we can run this thing, or is it a half-second delay and that gets me hit, and how do I respond from that? So it's going to be interesting to see how things work out over there for the Redhawks.
And I like the statement, we'll see, because with preseason, it's just that's all you can say is we'll see. You see these players play for 2-3 years before, maybe even just one, but we'll see is the only thing you can say, because with new players filtering in different positions, I know Somerville specifically, since I follow them along all season long, they don't have an offense as far as we're concerned, so that's the we'll see for them. But we'll see just might have to be the new name of the show, honestly.
Absolutely. I mean, and then Calaveras didn't do himself any favors, really. Their preseason schedule is kind of loaded. And they got Stone Ridge Christian, Carson City from Nevada, which they have to go to Carson this year because Carson came down last year. Okay, they play Ripon Christian, and Galt. I mean, that's a tough preseason schedule
Very
for
tough.
Anybody. Not to mention the team that's kind of rebuilding, and with a new coaching staff, and a new quarterback, and new offensive line. So it's going to be a situation where can Calaveras get things together and build? It might be a rough week 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Okay, can the kids stay together? Can you keep them together and say, hey, none of that matters. League is what matters for us. We got to get our wins in the preseason. We got to get a couple, but we're really shooting for those league play games. But that's going to be difficult. You know, I mean, it's that whole schedule for Calaveras is difficult, and that's kind of why I have them in the lower end of the league this year as we look forward.
And speaking of league, staying Mother Lode League, and now this was a question mark at the very beginning, the first meeting of the CIF getting together. I believe it was Argonaut, Amador going to split off one way, Sonora, Calaveras, and then Bret Hart, Somerville were all going to be in 3 different groups. But now it's Somerville, Bret Hart, and Calaveras staying in here, in which Calaveras could definitely be a powerhouse in this league as they commit back to playing football and bringing that program back together. But in your eyes, good or bad impact on the league?
I think it's good for Calaveras. Okay, Calaveras, like you said, and I've talked to some sources, their JV team is supposed to be pretty good. Okay, so their varsity team may take some lumps this year, but when everybody leaves and the new shuffle comes in, and I think it's going to work out pretty well for Calaveras. Could they be the new Sonora? I think Calaveras. I think the other team that really is going to benefit from it is actually Bret Hart. But I think those two teams, both the Calaveras teams, are going to like where they sit come new Mother Lode League next year.
And with the Mother Lode League, they actually have, I believe, 2 teams that are only in there for football. And that's what comes a harder question for the league itself in the section is saying, okay, well, these teams fit together in football, but in basketball-wise, these teams are going to lose every game. And then it comes to softball, it comes to baseball. So trying to find a happy medium all the way across the board for all the different sports is very, very difficult. But football-wise, I mean, I think it's pretty even for them staying in.
Yeah, I do. Like I said, I like the additions that are coming into the Mother Lode League. Sonora, I think, is going to benefit from going to the TVL, just like I thought Amador and Argonaut are going to benefit from going there. And it's going to give some teams that have traditionally been struggling in football a chance to kind of rebuild. You know, I mean, Riverbank's coming in and they've been struggling. They're going independent this year so that they can try and rebuild and come into the league next year. Some smaller schools like Millennium come in. They didn't have a football league, so they get to come over here.
I actually do have to say that that's probably better than the Wildfires. The Millennium Falcons, I mean, you can't get any better than that.
I like the Wildfire, but the Falcons, I mean, I can get that too. So, yeah, so I think it's going to be an interesting mix come next year's MLL. And then, again, Calaveras, Bret Hart are 2 teams that are going to benefit, I think, the most from the changing of the league.
And you mentioned most of these teams, but the new 18 MLL for the next season, Big Valley Christian, Bret Hart, Calaveras, Linden, Millennium, River Islands, Riverbank, and Somerville. So that's going to be the 18 league for them. And I know Somerville, since they're always a smaller school, they want to play some hefty teams in the preseason. And as we mentioned in the Argonaut Amador situation with the 8-team league, you don't have all the options to play those hefty teams and get yourself ready. You don't.
But, I mean, you got to look at it, too, though, is that coming with that into that league, Linden's going to be a decent program. They have a new coach, transition again this year. But gone is Coach Herrera, that he's kind of stepped down and taken a backseat over there in Linden. They've been playing up. They've been playing in the Sacramento League, or not Sacramento, in the Stockton League, rather, with Edison, West and Ranch, Franklin, those kind of Bear Creek. So they've been up. And they should have made the playoffs last year, if you ask me, or some people I know. They didn't. They did not get a at-large bid, even though they had a record that was better than some other teams. But be that as it may, the seating committee said, hey, we feel that this was going to be a different situation. So they've been successful the last couple of years. They've rebuilded. They've rebranded their team. And I think them coming in the league, again, it's one of the newcomers that's going to benefit extremely from coming into another league and not have to play the Stockton teams every week. Even though it's a little bit more driving for them, I think that's going to fit well. And they've been in the Mother Lode League before. They're not a stranger. They've been here. They just haven't been here the last couple of years. So I think it's going to work out well. And I know I have talked to some of the Linden people, and they were happy to come back to the Mother League. So.
Looking at the Week 1 matchup for Calaveras, it's a first-time matchup between these two teams, Stone Ridge Christian and the Calaveras Redhawks. And now Stone Ridge Christian, we got a chance to do the homecoming game for Somerville last year, in which Stone Ridge Christian in the D7 bracket came up, played Somerville, and Somerville said, hey, we played this team before, it should be an easy breeze by, but then they saw some film, they saw some games, and Stone Ridge Christian is not a D7 school, and they're not going to be anymore after this year,
right.
But they came in, gave them a run. Somerville still took the victory and went undefeated all the way up until the final week of the season against Sonora. But Stone Ridge Christian, very run-heavy offense. They hand the ball off, and they make an 11-man dog pile with their own team and just walk until the referees blow the whistle.
No, and it's that Argonaut style of offense, and so that's why a lot of these little league teams like to play that in the preseason, try to get ready for that typical Argonaut style. And you're right. I mean, Stone Ridge is a team that is really, really good. I don't care what division they're in. I don't care what league they're in. You play them, you know you're going to play a game that's going to be a physical game because they like to hit.
Yep.
They like to play, like you said, that 11 guys in the box, we're going to run at you. And then when you get tired of doing that and everybody goes, okay, we're going to fly up and stop that, they'll go play action, hit that tight end over the top for the pop pass, and there he goes for 30 yards for a touchdown. So it's really something that they've bought into there. They do it well, and hats off to them. I mean, that's one of those things where you got to commit to it, and you may run the ball 0, 0, 0, 12, 25, 0, I mean, and then boom, play action, pop, hit them 25 yards. It could get ugly. It looks ugly sometimes, but it's really effective when you got smaller kids and you have less of a talent pool to pull from. It's one of those equalizers, and then they do a really good job at running that. So I think that's going to be a tough test for Calaveras tomorrow night to see how do they match up. Can they come up and be physical enough to stop that run game? Can they stay disciplined to where we're not looking in the backfield, and there goes that tight end bias. And offensively, Calaveras, it's the question mark, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to be a question mark for teams we talk about in the future. Can they score points? Mm-hmm. That was the big deal last year. Calaveras' defense was one of the probably top in the league, but they couldn't score any points to help them.
Yeah.
So when you give up a touchdown, you really now feel like you're down 2 or 3 touchdowns because you can't score. So that's going to be the question: is can they put points on the board? Everybody says defense wins championships, but you still got to score somewhere.
You still
to win a game. I mean, even if you give up 6 and don't score any, you're going to lose a game. That's how it works.
Yeah.
So you got to get points somewhere: offense, defense, special teams. Where is that going to come from Calaveras? That's the question.
Yeah, and I believe Stone Ridge Christian scored the second most amount of points against Somerville, 28 points. I think it ended 34-28, in which they just kept pushing that ball forward through the line. They'd score, and I like exactly what you said. You still have to score at some point, and that phone is going to be ringing every single possession for Calaveras, and it's their choice to pick it up or not. And have an answer back. And I think it's going to be a good tell for the Calaveras season. If they're able to put a few touchdowns up and stop a few drives, then Calaveras is going to be better than what we have in our rankings.
Yeah, again, I mean, this is the week 1 rankings. We could see Calaveras come out tomorrow night, put 55 points on the board, and we'll go, okay, maybe they can score points, I mean, but just from the information we have, that's what we're going off of now. Do I expect them to put 55 points on the board? Probably not. I see it being a probably 35-14 Stone Ridge Christian victory over Calaveras tomorrow night. But again, we'll see tomorrow night. I mean, that's kind of how it works.
Do you have an exact number for us for that game tomorrow?
Yeah, I'm going to go 35-14.
35-14.
Yep.
All right.
Stone Ridge Christian.
That's the exact one.
That's it.
All right, 35-14.
Yep.
I like Stone Ridge Christian a lot. They put up a lot of points last season. They were also a playoff team in which I'm going to say 42 and give Calaveras 14, but it's not easy to score on that team anyway.
Yep, so I agree. I mean, defense has been what they've been. The calling card's been at Calaveras. The question mark is, can they stop that offense? I don't think right now they can week 1.
Yeah, so 42-14 and 35-14 for you on that side. And before we get into the second half of the Mother Lode League, our show today is sponsored by the Sonora Conference Center. 4 unique rooms in downtown Sonora. We have the podcast room, the green room, the blue room, this massive hall in here for lectures and everything else. So go to sonoraconferencecenter.com to learn more and rent it out today. Moving on, Bret Hart, unfortunately for the second time in 3 years, not having a team. They will have a junior varsity team, but on the varsity level, will not be competing in the final year of the MLL as we know it.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. I know the staff over there because I obviously was there for a little while. I talked to some people there, and they were really disappointed with the decision they had to make. But it's just one of those things where they're trying to build a program. They have only 20 or so players on JV as well. So that's kind of a tough situation. I know they had about 4 or 5 guys that were wanting to play varsity football. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, they had to. I know one of them transferred out. The other ones just decided, okay, we're not going to do anything. We're gonna stay here. So it's a tough break for Bret Hart. I feel for the guys over there making the decisions. Coach Osborne, a great friend of mine. I do feel for him. However, I do think the future is positive there. I know they're looking towards the 8th grade class right now. Mm-hmm. I talked to the offensive coordinator over there, their new offensive coordinator, who's a friend of mine, Quinn Whittle. He said, yes, it's not going to look great for a little bit. He goes, but we have guys coming next year. And I was like, okay. He goes, we have a team at the AMA level that we really have high hopes for. Mm-hmm. So they're really putting a lot of stock in them. They're sending some coaches down to help them. They're trying to spend time with them, trying to rebuild a program. And again, the best thing for them could be the fact that the MLL League is shifting and changing. And it could be a situation where now gone is the Argonaut, Amador, Sonora, which are brawl, physical, brutal games. Every football game is, but I mean, some more so than others. And now you get some of the newer teams that come in that are more on your level. The Riverbanks, the Millennium, who they had played last year. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be positive for them moving forward, but we'll see. They only have, I think, 4 games scheduled right now. There are 2 more pending. We will kind of hit on that, but it's kind of one of those things where we understand you, Bret Hart. We were here for you, but we're going to talk about the games that are happening in the varsity level. So
yeah, and looking at their time in the MLL, they've had a lot of great seasons. You were there during a few of them. They've been on the lower end in the bracket, but they still had good seasons periodically, but it was just because of those teams, like you said. And the future looks good. I mean, you hit every single point that I was going to touch on. So
sorry to steal your thunder there.
No, you're good. And I think with this new Motherlode League, it'll just be a toss-up every year, and you might see those 4-4 seasons where one team just goes because of the points scored.
Right.
So that'll definitely be interesting to look at. Now, moving into the Tuolumne side, in which I have in my top 2, you have in the top 3, only having Argonaut splitting in between them. But the Sonora Wildcats, the dominant force of the league for 7 straight years. Only one time did they get a challenge, and that was a 3-way tie, Sonora still being in one of the top spots. But let's look at their losses first, because I think the losses determine part of the season that we really need to be ready for. And the big 2 is the defensive side, Roger Alderman and Tyler Sells. Now, Tyler Sells going to Modesto Junior College, and Roger Alderman going to Utah. These 2 guys, they both could have played at the same school. They were both really good, but Roger got that step ahead. They were so fast on defense. They were able to get through anybody. They would just push them down, step on them, and bulldoze right over and tackle whoever was behind the line. And that's what made Sonora absolutely fantastic, is they never gave a chance for their offensive opponent to score. And so losing those 2 is going to be very difficult, and now they have to rely upon upcoming players to play those defensive roles, but also pick up some of that slack offensively.
No, absolutely. And another huge loss for Sonora is at the quarterback position. Kerno is now gone. Okay, and so you're like, okay, well, that's going to take a hit. It may or may not, because he's going to be replaced by some kid named Adam Kerno. Oh, wait, that's his little brother, who's played in the system his whole life. And so knowing them, and I think he's going to step in now. Will he be as effective as his older brother right off the bat? I don't know about that as far as throwing the football wise, but he does a great job of hiding the ball, using the offense to his advantage, and making plays. So I think that's going to be big for him to step in, and he's not really a drop-off, I would say, as far as the mental side of the football. It's going to be hey, junior year, varsity starter, how's that going to impact me? But again, Kerno for Kerno is a great handoff
Yeah.
To your little brother who's going to be taking the reins at quarterback.
I believe we saw him a little bit last year too. But right now, the word on the street is that Curnow is injured, and that I've heard two different names that could fill in that slot. One of them being Eli Ingles, who
that was the other one that I've heard.
Yeah, he went into the joint practices, and he was the starter as of now. But how long will he start? How long will he be in that position? Will they change the team as they move on? We don't know, and like I said, we'll see.
Yeah, the advantage there is he's got a couple backs and he can hand the ball to him. Audie Peoples comes back as a senior. I mean, and that's a great guy to just say, hey, I'm a young quarterback. I'm going to turn and hand the ball to you and let you do the work. Jackson Ludwig is another kid that didn't get a lot of carries last year. I think he's going to get more this year as a senior running back. He's another one of those backs you can just turn, hand the ball to and say, I need 3 yards, go get me 3 yards. And he may break it for big yards. They got a couple wing backs, Cash Byington and Bryce Nicholson. Nicholson can fly.
Yes,
okay?
yes, he can. So
he's one of those kids that you get on the outside and he's gone. So it's going to be one of those things where they got a lot of pieces, but who's going to be the guy? And then that's kind of the question mark at a lot of these teams right now is you've lost a bunch. Who's going to be the guy to step up and replace, big losses? Brody Spears is an outside wide receiver that Curnow could hit as well. He's a sophomore coming up to play varsity. So it's going to be interesting to see how things adjust there. Sonora. Now, last year they threw the football more than they had the last couple years because of Curnow's ability to throw the football. Do they stick with that mindset, or they go back and go, okay, no, we're going to go back and it's going to be run, play action? Look, we'll see what they decide to do. Coach Clifton over there, offensive coordinator, does a great job of keeping things kind of in mix, bringing the new stuff in slowly and not changing the offense too much so that the guys have ran it from their freshman year up. But I wouldn't be shocked to see a couple new wrinkles here and there. And tomorrow night against Oakdale, Oakdale's got a new coach. So how's that going to play into the factors? Sonora came up played Calaveras. Oakdale came up to Sonora last year, and Sonora had Oakdale, and then let them off the hook. And so how's that going to play into things tomorrow night? It's going to be interesting to see, and it's at the Corral, so there'll be, I don't know, probably 9,000 people there making a bunch of noise. So it's going to be a great atmosphere, especially week 0 or 1, however you want to look at it, in the high school football season. It's one of those places if you're not doing anything, it's a great place to go watch the game.
Yeah, and the first thing you mentioned there was Audie Peoples, and Peoples shocked not only the Mother Lode League, but I think the entire Sac-Joaquin section with his ability to pop out and just do what he did on the field. He ran the ball, and with Sonora, when they run that ball so consistently, everyone knows that they're going to hand it off. So you get this consistency of 4 to 6 yards every single time. But what Audie Peoples did was something so different that nobody expected it, and he just became a turning point to Sonora football, in which they kept him out on the field, and I don't expect anything less. He's going to do that again, but now he's a senior. He's had a year to grow, build some muscle, and he's going to be better than ever. And I think he's going to be the one that's picking up the slack offensively to make up for maybe some losses in different areas.
No, I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah, and speaking of that last season, 10-3 total, 4-0 in league, losses to Oakdale in overtime, which was a very sad one. I think it was somewhere close to that 30-7 mark at some point.
I believe it was right after halftime. Yeah, it was on NorCal SportsTV. You can go back and watch that live and on demand anytime you like. But yeah, Sonora was up big. Oakdale came out in the third quarter, kind of came back. It was a one-score game, I think, going to the fourth quarter, and then there was a couple turnovers that swung Oakdale's way, and they got into overtime, and then were able to come away with a victory. So again, the rivalry games, you never know what's going to happen, especially when you play them early in the season like that one. Always the first game of the season. It's one of those things you never know what's going to happen. So we'll see tomorrow night.
And then second to last game of the season, they picked up a game after Bret Hart decided to forfeit. Got Antelope, which was a pretty high-ranked team. They had some wild things happen during the game, in which I believe there was almost 100 total points, or more, actually 104 total points in the game between the two teams. And Sonora lost by 2, which they also blew a lead in that one.
They did. They had a chance to kind of put Antelope away. Now, granted, Antelope, D2-3 school that had some receivers that were amazing, but the quarterback was really the star of the show for them. I think he threw for 500 plus yards. I believe it was 7 touchdowns, could have been 8. And it was a lot regardless.
Too many.
And threw a Hail Mary touchdown on the second to last play of the game, which he ended up doing again in the playoffs and beating Tracy 2 weeks later, and we were watching that. So he kind of, been there, done that. Here it is again. Antelope was a tough decision because they ran a 4-receiver set all the time. They threw the football around, and it's not something that the Mud League teams see a lot. And the Mud League teams tend to be more ground-oriented. Yeah. And Antelope was like, yeah, we can run the ball, but we're going to throw the football all the time. And they did, and that showed some holes in the Sonora defense. Obviously not too many, though, because they still made it to the second championship game.
That's true.
And came, within a point away from knocking off the eventual state champion Escalon. So.
Yeah, so they lost to Oakdale by a touchdown, 7 points, Antelope by 2, and then, like you said, Escalon in the section title game by 1 point. So their total loss by points through those 3 games is 9, which, I mean, you could break it down to being a field goal apiece, but in reality, it's 1 possession each game that it came down to. And, like, that 1 touchdown could have easily been 1 point the other way in each of those games, and they could have went undefeated and got that extra victory. But in the end, that's what it came down to. But also in that time, they averaged 45 points per game, which, I mean, that's unheard of. That's ridiculous. And of course, they run that classic Wildcat offense. But, just a few more passes in the game, it's not going to hurt anyone unless the teams catch on and are able to sniff out when they are going to pass that ball. And that's one thing that nobody has really caught on to in the last 8 years.
No, it's very hard to defend that Sonora offense. I mean, you're like, okay, they run the ball all the time. This isn't going to be hard. We're just going to focus on hitting the fullback. That's the key. Well, you do that, and the fullback hits 3 yards, but then you got the quarterback, Curnow, that pulls it and takes it off, and now he's down the sideline, and he goes 40 yards. So you're like, okay, what do we got to do to stop the quarterback? So now you got 2 more guys that are coming over to watch him. We only have 11 guys on defense. I know this is a new thing, right? So if everybody's watching these 2 guys, there's somebody that's not accounted for, and that's what happens. It's one of those, like, all eyes go this way, and then the guy over here goes, hey, I'm open, and they hit him on a slant, and he goes to the house. And so it's real difficult with Sonora to kind of, when do we get aggressive and come after them, and when do we just say, okay, we'll take a 3-yard run and make them drive it down the field, and maybe they'll turn the ball over. Maybe they'll have a bad pitch. Maybe they'll do something that will get a penalty to help us out. But when you're relying on defense, it makes it a long night.
And that's why going into their new league is going to be a lot better for Sonora and a lot better for the Mother Lode League teams too. This new league, tough matchups. You have Escalon, Hilmar, Houston, Modesto Christian, Oristemba, Ripon Christian, and of course Sonora being added to that. But a lot of these teams, no strangers to Sonora, and Sonora's no stranger to them. They play almost every single year in the preseason. They have good battles. Every once in a while, Sonora will dip down and lose a few games in the preseason, and then other times they'll go undefeated like this one, or close to it at least. But this is going to be something different. They used to be in the Valley Oak League, which was even tougher, dropped down 2 levels to the Mother Lode League, and now going back up 1 step at a time to the Trans Valley League, which I think will be the best possible option that they could have chosen for Sonora this year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good fit for them in football. I think they become, not necessarily the powerhouse anymore, not the number 1 guy all the time. So that can be good, because when you're not the number 1 guy and there's we have a game that's 35-0 at halftime, and so your guys kind of dip down and lose intensity, and you're doing that 2-3 weeks in a row, and then all of a sudden you get to the playoff game that, hey, we got to play all 4 quarters and it's intense and this and that. That's not necessarily a good team thing for your offense and defensive players. So being in that TVL where games usually come down to the last play or last drive or 1 possession games, I think those will be better overall for Sonora. I don't think maybe not on the win-loss column every week, but building a team that can compete in the playoffs and move into a section championship and state championship, I think it's going to be better for them to move into that TVL and be more competitive in league play games than they have been in the past.
And going back to that Oakdale rivalry, week 1 game, the big rivalry, 100 years was last year, so 101 years now. Sonora 2-16 in the last 18 games that Oakdale and Sonora have played. The last one winning being in 2016, where they won 27-13, and then prior to that was 2005 with a 23-21 win. Should have won last year, make it 3-15, but now they have the chance to get that 3rd victory in the last few years.
Yeah, and it's been one-sided. I mean, unfortunately, Oakdale's kind of been taking the positive side of the rivalry, so to speak. Down the corral, week 0. I want to say it's going to be an upset, but I don't. I just can't do it. I think Oakdale pulls it off. I'm going to say 35-28. I think it's a one-score game. I think Sonora opened some eyes and maybe kind of shocked some things, but I think in the end, Oakdale might pull it off. So that's where I'm going, 35-28. And tomorrow night, I mean, again, it's a great place to see a game. At the Corral, you'll be with 9,000 of your closest friends. If you're in the area, it might be a great place to stop by.
I'm going to say 24-17. Oakdale going to win this as well. I think the clock is going to run super fast with these teams just running the ball, moving it along. They are going to score quite a bit, but it's going to be at an even pace that is going to keep everyone involved, going to keep everyone thinking that it's still in, going to come down to that one possession. Probably right before the half, go possession, field goal, and just say, hey, they got a field goal, let's get one too. And it's just going to be back and forth until that final drive gets that eventual victory. But moving on to the season as a whole, we both have them as number 1, and our guy Dossie had the best point of it, saying they are number 1.
Until you're proven otherwise, Sonora will remain the top dog in the league for one more year. And I mean, that's the thing. You want to beat the man, you got to beat the man to beat the man, or however it goes. But you want to beat Sonora and be the number 1 thing, you got to do it on the field. Until then, Sonora's number 1 team. Sonora's the number 1 pick for the Moto League. And, if you're a fan of another school, you get a chance to upset them, and that's what you got to do.
Yeah, and this was what this whole thing is about too. I mean, Sonora, they've had the reign, and can someone take it away, or can they keep it for one final year and just basically dominate and say, hey, yeah, we had the MLL. That's who we are. We are Mr. MLL. But yeah, I have them at number 1, and I think it's just going to be them and Somerville when it comes down to it. But you have Argonaut slotted above Somerville.
I do, and again, I think that's a coin flip with Somerville, Argonaut. It could go either way, but I gave the edge to Argonaut. They alphabetically they come first, so there you go. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things.
What about Sonora? I mean, Sonora's an S.
Well, Sonora's number 1. Okay. So when we got Argonaut and Somerville, you're trying to figure it out. It's a coin flip. This week we'll give it a nod to Argonaut. After tomorrow night, we may change our mind and say, okay, we think Somerville could be the number 2 team. We'll see how that plays out.
I don't even think we'll know what we're in for that final week of the season until we see league play.
Yeah, absolutely.
If Sonora doesn't play any common opponents with Somerville, we're not going to know how these teams balance each other unless we go into the depths of, this team played this team, and then it's just 6 degrees of who played Sonora, 6 degrees of who played Somerville. So,
and it's a rivalry game. I mean, that's one of those things. True. Even though it's been a one-sided rivalry, I mean, Sonora's kind of handled things, but there isn't anybody that goes to Somerville that says, hey, we'd trade everything if we could beat Sonora. Okay, sure. I mean, that's one of those scenarios where, hey, if we can beat Sonora, whatever else happens. And then you get them talking about it in the fall, that have talked about in the spring and baseball season. We hear it, hey, we're going to beat Sonora at football. And okay, that's great, but we're playing baseball right now. Let's focus on this. So it's one of those things that's in the mind for 364 days a year.
Yep. Is
beating Sonora. Let's see, and again, vice versa. Sonora says, hey, we're not going to be the team that loses to Somerville.
Right.
So it's good league rivalry. It's good cross-county rivalry. I hope they continue to play each other now that they're not going to be in the league. I mean, that's to be now determined. They didn't play each other before when they weren't in the league together very often, so we'll see how that plays out. But it's one of those things that Oakdale, Sonora has been 100 years. I'd like to see Somerville, Sonora continue past the league play and then play each other in a non-league game, but we don't make those decisions, so we'll let the people in charge make those decisions.
Moving on to Somerville now, let's look at their losses, in which it's their offense. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Braylon Levereau starting quarterback, Kai Elkins starting running back, and Dean Tremoloni, the number 1 wide receiver. Those 3 alone made up of 95% of the offense for the Somerville Bears, and losing those 3 are huge because of the way they ran it in general. Dean Tremoloni only I mean, if you can even consider them dropped passes, they were either bad balls that you would say where Braylon just had to get rid of it, or it was thrown out of bounds. They were just doing something else. But Dean only missed, I think, 8 throughout the entire season, and most of the time when he caught it, he was scoring as well. Kai Elkins just kept busting that line, kept going through, and Braylon Leveros was a whole different story where the coaches gave him options, and that's something that you rarely see in high school alone. And with Somerville, too, you just don't see that happening. So those 3 missing, Somerville, as far as we know, doesn't have an offense, and it's going to be them building it that will determine their season or not.
Yeah, you said 95% of your offensive productivity is gone through graduation. So the big thing is Somerville's defense has been solid. Okay, it kind of goes back to that Calaveras point I made earlier, is that if you only give up 6 points and you don't score any points, you're still going to lose every game.
Right.
Offensively, somebody or a combination of somebody's has to come in for Somerville and say, hey, I'm the guy now. I'm the one that wants the ball in the big situations. We talked about quarterback play at Sonora, where a brother's handed to a brother. Well, same situation at Somerville is what we expect.
Yep.
Okay, Leveros leaves. Next Leveros comes up, and he's going to be taken over as a sophomore. He was there on varsity last year as a freshman, so that helps him, I think, too. He played wide receiver, not quarterback, but getting a chance to kind of know the offense, be in it, be at the varsity speed, I think that's going to give him an advantage over somebody else coming in to play quarterback. But he's still a sophomore. I don't care if he's,
And that's where I come into play, too, is because with Bryce Leveros, like you said, he played on varsity. He was a fantastic receiver. He kept up with every single team, including Houston, where there was at one point he was down the right sideline, caught the pass, dragged down by the horse collar, still scored the touchdown, and very physical player, and that was as a freshman. So as he just continues, it's going to be big for the Somerville offense. But then you have the guy like Luke Larson, who's the junior varsity quarterback, who's now a junior. So he's a year older. He's
sophomore.
He's a sophomore?
Yes.
Oh, my mistake. Well, he was in that quarterback position nonetheless. And now you have 2 sophomores, one that played quarterback, one that didn't. And which role do you take there where you have experience, or who's going to have the longevity throughout the next 3 years?
Yeah, and that's the big question at Somerville. Like we said, we believe it's going to be Bryce Leveros tomorrow night. But could they share time? Absolutely. Luke did play at the JV level, so he's been there. He's done that. Where Bryce, he didn't take very many snaps, if any, last year.
I don't think he took any.
And I'm not sure that he took a lot in youth football. So him learning a new position is going to be a difficult situation for him. Now, he's a Leveros. He's been there. He's seen his brother do it. I'm sure he's heard 1,000 conversations with Dad about situations and that, even though Dad's not the offensive coordinator. He's going to be, I think, the guy that, like I said, has the leg up. But I wouldn't be shocked if Luke comes in and kind of makes it a competition. So that's the question mark at Somerville, is who's going to be the guy to step up at quarterback? Who's going to be the guy that steps up at running back? Who's going to be the guy that steps up at wide receiver, at tight end? The one position group where they don't have questions is the offensive line. They've been together. A lot of them have been on there since they were freshmen. Now that's their senior year. They're going to be the kind of the building block, per se, for Somerville, which is great because whoever plays quarterback, you don't want your quarterback touched. Whoever's playing running back, you got to make holes for them, and those guys are the experienced guys, led by the Wynn twins in there. And so they're going to come up, the quarterback, whoever it is, and say, okay, I got offensive line. I don't have to worry about being protected, which is a huge advantage for a young quarterback. So it's going to be an interesting sight tomorrow night against Gustine. Gustine's a team that usually has a couple playmakers and a little bit of speed. Not a huge powerhouse team, but you never know with them. They have years that they're really, really good, and then there's some years that they kind of struggle. Last year, Somerville handled Gustine pretty easily. So who knows how that's going to play out. Somerville has to take the long bus ride down to Gustine, and that could play a factor, an hour and 45 minutes on a bus. How do they respond there? Like I said earlier, I personally, as a coach, loved bus rides. But some teams don't do well, especially early in the season, on bus rides. So it's one of those things where you never know what's going to happen. The great part is that we get to find out here in only 24 hours. Because
it's true.
We're tired of saying what if and this and what's going to happen in practice and versus error or scrimmage last week. Yeah, scrimmages are good, but that doesn't matter. Now, Friday Night Lights come on for the first time. It's opening week. Who's gonna step up and be the guy? And that's the big question mark I have at Somerville.
And I mean, I'm not a football coach. I never have been, probably never will be. But when I look at the Somerville roster alone, you have 7 options.
Absolutely.
And they're all speedy options. They can all handle the ball. But of course, you have the main guy that's going to be your quarterback, and everyone else has experience running and moving. And those guys, you have both Barajas, you have both Hikes, you have Leveros, Larson, Cash, and Lopez. I mean, you put all these guys in the backfield, and it's too many for one play. But my point is, you can put multiple guys into the field of play, whether they're slots, they're wideouts, running backs, fullbacks, tailbacks. Like, you can name every single position that's a skill position, and all of these guys are worth their salt. So the defense is going to look at him and say, I know that guy. He did this to us last year. He did this to Calaveras. He did this to Dos Palos. And they all have to pay attention. And then wherever that ball goes, you have to make sure you almost split up because you're not sure where it's going after that. I mean, there's so much that comes down to it. Will they do that or not? We'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, that's one of those things where, as a coach, there's a lot of things you can teach, but you can't teach speed.
Right.
Okay, and Somerville's got speed at multiple guys, multiple positions. And so that's going to be a huge, how do they use it? How are they going to tweak it? How are they, like you said, we can line up 5 guys out there that can fly. So how are they going to incorporate that into the offense? It's a great question. It's a great problem to have here, a coach. But at the end of the day, you still have to execute. And so it's just one of those things where, great, I love having speed. Can't teach that, but we got to teach you how to block, or we have to teach you how to execute, or that speed doesn't matter. So it's one of those things, all those guys moving up from the JV team, they were successful at the JV level. Now they got to translate it to the varsity level. Can that happen? Will it happen? Will they gel with the guys that were on the varsity last year? Huge questions. Now, could I see them being the number 2 seed in the league? Absolutely. Like I said, I think it's a corn flip between them. Right now, I just gave the nod to Argonaut, and so I have them at the 3 seed.
Future of the MLL for Somerville, new top dog, life without the Wildcats. I mean, what's going to happen for Somerville?
Again, them, Calaveras, and Bret Hart are the teams that obviously are left, but I think it's a great situation for them because Somerville is already a team that has proven themselves in the playoffs the last couple of years. They went to the section championship last year, lost to Houston, who is a team that they'd already beaten.
Yep.
Okay, so it's not a situation where they're like, oh my goodness, we can't compete. Now you got new guys coming in. I think it's going to be in the new Mother Lode League. I think Somerville, Calaveras, Linden are the top 3 teams, but then I think everybody else is on equal footing. So it's not like you have a huge drop off like we've had in the past. So I think it's going to be good for them to have a chance to be the hunter instead of the hunted, and kind of picking teams off from the top perch as they go into the new Mother Lode League.
And now looking at the week 1 matchup versus Gustine, you preluded to it already. Last year, Somerville won 42-9, in which they did get a safety, and that was in the 3rd quarter. They had brought in their secondaries, which was Austin Hike and Tristan Barajas, and they were just put in a bad situation, but they wanted to make sure they got the reps. And unfortunately, I believe it was a fumble, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I believe so.
And then they jumped on it and just gave up the safety in that, but that's what led to the 9 points for Gustine, in which they were 4-7 last year. Gustine, you look at this matchup and you say this could be a really good one, or one of these teams could come out on top by a big margin.
Yeah, and Gustine, like I said, they had a chance last year coming in the last week of the season to make the playoffs. So it wasn't like they were, oh my goodness, they weren't the great team. It was a bad matchup for Somerville. It was a situation where Gustine got better as the season went on, and that's what you look for as a team. Now, does that translate to this year? It's their home opener. They're at home. I think it's going to be a tighter matchup than maybe some people think, but I think Somerville pulls it off. I mean, it's one of those things where I think somehow, some way, Somerville finds a way to score some points. Now that could be a reverse on the kickoff to get a touchdown because, hey, it's
Somerville switcheroo.
Okay, it's Somerville. They like to play on special teams, which is great, especially early in the season. Is a great time to pull that off. Right. I wouldn't be shocked to see a defensive touchdown, okay, or maybe even a couple defensive scores. And so that kind of takes some of the pressure off of your offense to putting points on the board. I think, in the end, I think Somerville has too many weapons to not pull off the victory tomorrow night. and I'm going to say it's probably going to be, I'm going to say 35 to 14-ish.
Okay,
for Somerville.
I'm actually in a similar boat. I think it's going to be very equal to last year. Take away that safety, give them a touchdown, so make it 42-14 because
I could see that too.
With the offense that they had, they were together for so long that they took him out a few plays into the third quarter. So now you have guys that are just now playing these positions. They want to really get this team going and just working together gear by gear. So I think they're going to replicate offensively. Defense is going to have just a tiny bit of a problem just because a lot of those guys from JV are coming up to those slots and might be a little skittish of making some tackles.
No, absolutely. And on the defensive side, we didn't talk about that, but I mean, they're replacing some guys that made impacts there too. I mean, Hardy's gone.
Yeah, Jaden Hardy, Logan Slater.
Logan Slater are gone, both baseball players.
Ty
They're
Elkins
gone.
again. He
Elkins
played
both ways. So that's going to be a big question mark on that defensive side. I just feel like they have more guys to plug in place. Bryce Rathmel coming up from the JV. I think he's going to have a huge impact on the defense side of the football. So I think that the holes there are smaller to fill and not as noticeable, say, to like the casual football fan as you see on offense.
Yeah. So what it comes down to now, as we just wrapped up Somerville, the power rankings. We'll start with you. We'll move on to Guy Dossie, who sent his picks into you, and will also come out or have come out today in calenterprise.com, I believe is the website, or you can go to Cal Enterprise and subscribe, get the paper in the mail.
Yeah, special shout out to him. He gave us a lot of information. We've worked with him a lot in the past, so you go out, we'll download it, click on it, buy it, however you want to get your news. Check out that Calaveras Enterprise article coming out today. And every Thursday he has a Calaveras forecast for the week to come for whoever Calaveras is playing. So make sure you go out and check him out. I have, again, just to rank it down, I have Sonora, Argonaut, Somerville, Calaveras, and Amador as my 5 for the MOLO League this year.
And for Guy Dossie?
Dossie, he has Sonora, Somerville, Argonaut, Calaveras, and Amador. He said again that Sonora, Argonaut, Calaveras, he felt all three of them were going to kind of be question marks. He's a Somerville guy, so he said, can Somerville prove the success from last year, or was it a one and done? He's going to give them the edge in the preseason rankings over Argonaut, and like I said, I can see it either way, so I can't argue with him per se.
And I always keep going back and forth. Honestly, during this entire thing, I've moved my rankings around. But Sonora, Somerville, Calaveras, Amador, Argonaut is where I land with that. But it's all preseason rankings. It's just based on knowledge of what we've seen do in the past and with the players returning what they could possibly do this year. And we talked about all the matchups. We talked about all the teams. Unfortunately, once again, Bret Hart, no varsity team, so we're not going to be able to see them play tomorrow night. But closing thoughts for us as we enter week 1 play tomorrow.
I'm excited to see how things come out. I mean, it's one thing to do all this research and think of what could be, but now tomorrow night we get to see what is. I mean, you can be in the weight room and say, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. Yeah. But tomorrow night you put out and show, and that's one of the things we always talk about as coaches is all the practice stuff is fun, and nobody really enjoys doing that. Coaches don't enjoy that because it's Friday night. You get 10 guaranteed shows. You get to go out and show what you learned, show what you can do, show us on the field, show your parents in the crowd, everything. It's that time. It's finally here. I can't wait to get through some games tomorrow night and kind of look back and go, okay, now let's break down what happened, tomorrow night as opposed to what's going to happen.
Yes, and you can join us on NorCal Sports TV as the Somerville Bears take on the Gustine Reds, I believe is that mascot.
Yep.
We'll be in Gustine. Follow us live. Subscribe to NorCal Sports TV. Follow us on Twitter or X, whichever one you want to call it now, at Striking Gold MLL. But until next week, as we figure out these week 1 matchups, what happened, break it down a little bit more, and then moving on to week 2. He's Jeremy Hurtado. I'm Levi Flores. We'll see you for Striking Gold.